So I have to start off today's episode thanking YouTube and the algorithm that pushed my current guests' videos into my feed one morning over coffee. Uh, it's my morning ritual to pop my vitamins, drink my smoothie, and sip on coffee while watching videos related to everything guitar. Repairs, modifications, the newest reviews on the newest instruments, etc. Well, Steve Roy and his YouTube channel, Manotick Stringworks, popped into my feed one morning, and I noticed right away that he had a informed, caring approach to his repairs and modifications. I was immediately hooked, subscribed to his channel, and have continued to enjoy his videos. He has his workshop out of Ottawa, Canada, in the Manotick region of Ottawa, the country's capital city. I knew right away that I needed to reach out to Steve and see if he'd want to be a guest on my podcast, and he was immediate with his response. And I was happy to speak with him. So without further ado, Steve Roy from Manotick Stringworks. Hello, Steve.
Patrick, how are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me.
Well, it's an honor to be asked. That's great. That's fun.
Well, your video channel has some following. You've got some people that watch your movies. I was checking the ranking of your videos, and your most popular is setting up a floating trem on a Stratocaster, and that's a two-parter.
Yeah, then it's funny. I've done, a couple of hundred videos, if not more. I'm like a 250 maybe. And you see which ones trend, right, over time.
Yeah.
And like Fender stuff, everyone loves Fender stuff, right? So they're always there. But the really basic things like how to set up your Fender Stratocaster, how to set up your Telecaster, those seem to be things that people really want to view, of course, right? Mm-hmm. So many niche guitars out there, but for the most part, probably 75% of people are playing either a Fender, a Gibson, or a copy of that, right? Despite having all these other manufacturers out there, they're still playing Fender and Gibson style guitars, right?
The bass designs, that's pretty much full of them.
Well, Leo Fender got it right.
Yes, he did. And I'm a huge Fender fanatic myself, so I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and I appreciate Les Pauls and Gibson products, just like any other manufacturer, that has good quality manufactured product out there. But there's just something about Fender that appeals to me. I won't call it a working man's guitar, but it's a guitar that's meant to be played. It's meant to be fixed and meant to be played again.
Agreed.
And I really like that about a guitar, because so many times people are drawn to guitars that are pretty, right? Mm-hmm. They look really nice and they hang on the wall beautifully, or they live in a case and they're never out there. So when I get a guitar on the workbench and I see that it's been well used, well played, loved, obviously, that's the kind of guitar I gravitate towards. And whether it's a Fender or a Gibson or a PRS or whatever guitar, I just like seeing it being played. And if it just sits in a case because it's too precious to take out, then why bother?
It's like being a toy collector and having the Star Wars action figures still in the box. I mean, you bought it to play with it,
Exactly. Take them out, rub them up a little bit,
Yes, yeah.
Especially a guitar, right? You want to hear it play, right? And that's guitar doesn't play itself. So obviously a person plays it, a bass, a guitar, whatever. So it's really just going to become an extension of you, whatever you're playing. So find that guitar or a couple of guitars that really speak to you. They're comfortable in your hands. Whenever you play them, it just feels so good. Things come out of you easily. Mm-hmm. And that's what you got to search for. Like having 40 guitars doesn't really do too much, right? If you're not playing them every day and you don't sing to you, right? Like that.
Absolutely.
I'm no pro musician by any means. And I have a lot of friends who are, and they generally have 3 or 4 guitars, and that's it. They've had lots of guitars over the years, like all of us have had, of course.
Yeah, right.
But they have, 3 or 4 guitars, and 2 they play all the time. They gig with, let's say, all the time, and a couple more maybe they record with a little bit more often. But they always gravitate towards those two guitars that feel great in their hands.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's more important, right? So if you're really going to get into guitars and you like playing, find a couple of guitars that really feel good to you and play the heck out of them.
Yeah. And so being a Fender guy and a musician yourself, you said in your bio that you sent, is your collection a majority Fender?
Yeah, so I'm mostly a bass player. I mean, that's what that's what I started with in 1980, in grade 7, my first bass that I bought. And it was a jazz bass copy, a Korean copy at the time. And I had that bass for almost 20 years and actually modded the hell out of that thing.
Okay, cool.
At the end, it became a fretless bass at the end. I took all the frets.
Did you do that modification yourself?
Yeah, I did that, yeah.
That's great that you bring that up, and I hate to interrupt the story, but I have a client that's asking me to convert his Sterling to a fretless, and I did some investigative work. It's not as difficult as it was.
No. Well, it was for me back in the day because there were no YouTube videos, right?
I know.
Oh, it was terrible, right? No instructional guides or someone you could just call up unless you knew somebody, right? But it was, when I first started playing, in grade 7, when I was like 12 years old, and that first bass I had, I remember when I think back to that bass, like the setup was horrible. Like it was just brutal, and I didn't even know what to do with it, right? And so I played that bass the way it was the day I got it.
Through. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and high action and change of seasons, whatever. I just changed the strings every once in a while, and for at least 7-8 years, right up through college, I just played the heck out of that thing, and I had no idea what to do with it. Setup, what was that, right?
Yeah, right.
And then when I started to change things on that bass in particular, then I started to realize, oh, hold on, I can adjust the bridge and the neck relief with a truss rod, and oh my God,
it's so much easier as a player.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the voyage of discovery, right? In the sense to say, oh wow, I've spent 8 years playing this beast, and I could have been better. It could have been a lot easier. And I started buying more basses. I got some more money, and I was playing gigs with bands and stuff. So I got to play around with other designs, right, other than just like a jazz bass. So so it was interesting. So that bass stayed with me for years. It was in the closet for a long time. And I remember my wife one day says, you haven't taken that old bass out in a long time. I said, you're right. And it was a really like sky blue paint finish on it, maple fingerboard with inlays. So I took it out of the closet, and I'm looking at it. I had 3 or 4 other basses, and since that time, and they're sitting there too. I said, what am I going to do with this thing? Let's make it a fretless, right? So, just spur of the moment, got some pliers out and just started yanking the frets out, and, trying not to damage anything too much. It was pretty relatively successful.
Sure.
I got some thin veneer at the time, and I was able to glue it in there and worked as a fretless bass.
And the veneer you made sure was a good contrast so you could see the...
Yeah, I think it was a walnut. The only veneer I could get, at the local hardware store back in the day was a walnut, which was nice. It was a maple fingerboard, so he had a nice contrast. So it looked like frets in a sense, right? You could see them. But it was a lot of fun. You learn as you go, and I've become over the last 30 years, I would call myself more of a woodworker.
Okay.
I've renovated 3 and 4 homes with my wife. I've done
nice.
all kinds of restorations and things. So I have all the tools, for woodworking and shop stuff. So I've done a lot of woodworking over the years. So later in life now, like to me, working on guitars is more of a natural extension of taking some of those skills that I have and applying them in a more fine sort of way, right? Fine woodworking skills and specific ones to guitars. It's not just pure woodworking, obviously, dealing with guitars, but it's just an extension of what I like to do anyways. So now it's fun for me over the last 7-8 years, especially, to be pretty much working exclusively on guitars and guitar repair and things like that. Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned woodworking, because this client reached out to me asking to go fretless. At first I wanted to say, no, I don't have the capabilities to do that. It just seemed, and I've only been doing, like you, I've been playing since 1977, seriously since the 80s.
Yeah.
And my first guitar was a Sears Paul copy. Probably made by Silvertone, but they didn't put the name on it.
Right.
And yeah, like you, I struggled with high action. I didn't know how to adjust it. Little did I know I was, really working these finger muscles with that high action. So
you're making them strong. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one day I called in sick from school, and I just sat there and I took the guitar apart, took everything off of it, including the neck, and really worried I wasn't going to be able to get it back together again. And sure enough, you do. And it's like, wow, okay, my confidence just went up tenfold. I can do this. It's not going to break it. And then you start learning about adjusting and making it more comfortable.
Yeah,
but anyway, back to the fretless bass. Yeah. I started doing research, like you mentioned before. And of course, in my head, I'm thinking, how the hell did guys like Dan Erlewine or, the masters of back in the past, pre-YouTube, how did they figure it out? Right? You have to know somebody that knows somebody that's willing to take a phone call. But I ended up buying a chisel set for this guy's, because you have to get those veneers.
Yeah.
So it's this layered onion of discovery and confidence building. And it's really fun. It's really fun.
Well, it's the cloak of mystery, right? Around any trade, that people take on, and where you have, I liken it, when you're doing apprenticeship and that, right, where you learn from someone or other skilled tradespeople, craftsmen, and at the end of it all, you realize that there's no real mystery to this, right? But it's just knowledge and gaining knowledge and experience. And I've screwed up stuff.
Oh yeah.
Of course I've screwed up stuff, drilled through fretboards.
It's your own guitar.
Yeah, exactly. Like very few mistakes on other people's guitars, thankfully. But you go out and you buy a beater and you just start playing around with it, right? I mean, that's the biggest advice I've always given people. That's what I did. Just started buying a whole bunch of used guitars, kit guitars, stuff like that. You just start playing around with them and figure out what's going on. I mean, I know a truss rod is one of these things that there's this crazy mystery around a truss rod, and don't touch the truss rod, or we can't move it a quarter turn, let it sit for a week, then come back. And, all this stuff. I remember when I was first really getting into like service tech and repair and that, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't have something in there that you can barely touch and adjust, and you have to sit around and wait, and you're worried about it crashing. I mean, obviously you're not going to crank on the thing, right? But it's just like, wow, that's just a mystery, right? That's just not how it works,
right?
And then when then all of a sudden you master the truss rod, right? It's just, okay, this makes total sense, right? Of course.
Absolutely. And that first time that you do it, and you hear that click in there, oh God, I've broken it. Oh,
yeah.
It's never going to be the same.
Some guy's new guitar, right? And he's like, why is this? Oh, because it's still glued in there. You got to crack that glue, right?
I had a client, he brought from a bass guitar, as a Fender Jaguar bass off the wall from a big box store, local big box store. And he wanted it set up. And I was like, great, let's do it. I look at the neck. It's got a little bit of a bow in there. Let's give the truss rod a bit of adjustment, and which is the first thing I do before I take off the strings.
The first thing you do, yeah.
And suddenly I find out that it doesn't have the end pin on the end of the truss rod.
Oh, shit.
Apparently someone had cranked on it and popped it off.
Snapped it.
The best I could tell the client, because that's an exploration, and maybe you've done it, where you peel off the fingerboard, replace the truss rod altogether, but I obviously don't have that capability. And I told the guy, look, this neck is a Fender neck. It's a baseball bat. It's not going to warp over time. For one, I'd go get my money back from this big box store because they sold you a piece of crap.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know. But thankfully, it's okay for now. It's probably got years of being okay in the right humidity, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. But just know that I can't do it. You're probably fine. Do you find bass necks to be a lot more forgiving than guitar necks for that reason?
Actually, I find bass necks to be more troublesome
Oh,
because, yeah, it's a longer neck,
okay,
more string tension on,
sure.
even though those four strings are big, thick strings.
Yeah.
And I find the quality of the necks vary greatly. You'll get a lot of like soft, I'll call them, soft maples instead of
Oh,
like a really good hard stiff maple in there.
okay. Okay.
So yeah, it can be a little troublesome, and you'll see a lot of manufacturers, of course, especially the overseas ones, who've done, they do multi-laminated necks, of course, right, to try and avoid that issue. So they want a thinner neck profile. So you laminate the necks, get them a little stiffer, and generally that helps out. But I find there some of the cheaper, less expensive bases out there with single piece maple necks.
Mm.
That's when you can get into some bowing issues that you can't fix, or you really have to get into a heat treatment sort of scenario. I find it more often, like I said, with the bass, just because just more tension. And for some reason, bass players don't like taking care of their guitars as
Isn't
much
that
as
interesting?
guitarists do.
Isn't that interesting? This client brought it in and he had stickers all over it, and the nut was broken.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but it plays. And there was like 4 different kinds of screws holding in the input jack. And I'm like, do you want me to replace it? No, it's fine. It works. I don't need it. Wow, really? Okay.
Well, again, it comes back to if you're comfortable and you like the way it sounds, and
Well, there you go.
play, hey, whatever. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to sound great. You have to sound great playing it, right? So
yes,
whatever it is, right? It could be a cigar box type of
there
thing.
you go. And Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstein is a prime example of a piece of crap guitar just jerry rigged.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he performed on that guitar is unprecedented.
No, for sure. It's funny you mentioned like all the different things that you find when you receive a guitar in there, right? And one of the things I hate the most, or I'm always worried about, is that brand new guitar, right from the big box store or a nice boutique shop or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's the first time anyone's touched it, right?
Yeah.
I'm always looking at it going, what kind of customer is this, right?
Yeah, right.
Is this someone who's going to look at his guitar afterwards and go, that little tiny, stuff wasn't there, or I'm sure that there was no scratches. Like every time I get a brand new one, I said, I might scuff this up somewhere a little bit. I'm not going to scratch it and ding it or do anything like that, but
it's going to get
pristine.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Put it back. Are you okay with that? And most of the time, it's okay. It's brand new. I know it's going to get dinged up anyways or whatever, but it's just funny. You get those, and then you get the other ones that come in with, like you say, screws and stickers and all this, and you go, I could drop that off the bench and you won't even notice.
That's right. That could not improve the playing.
Yeah, exactly. Get it right back in alignment.
That's right. So Steve, that kind of reminds me of those guys that have a several $1,000 guitar, and he wanted the Floyd Rose set up.
Oh no, don't talk to me about Floyd Roses.
Oh, it's the worst. But I'm telling you, if you can master it, half your clientele are people with Floyd Roses.
Yep, I know.
Oh, and I had the drop D tuning mechanism on there too.
Yeah. So was it an EVH guitar? One of
yes, it was.
Yeah, with the little drop D thing there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then and it's a beautiful guitar. I was actually really impressed with the mechanism and the machinery and the quality of the build.
Mm-hmm.
But he ended up taking it home and he said, Patrick, one of the strings is catching on the fret. And he brought it back to me. And sure enough, because he does these wild bends where I don't know why, as a player personally, I bend the high E going up. I've never rattled it going down, but it popped off and caught the fret at the 9th fret. And we flipped it over and we're looking at the side, the fingerboard. And sure enough, at the 7th and the 9th, there are these little gaps that aren't completely filled in on the binding. And it's this $3,000 guitar. And I hated breaking the news to him, but this is really a quality build. Now that I'm looking, at this, which I didn't notice before. So I'm always hoping that the client doesn't find things that I didn't see before. And I guess it happens.
happens, you know.
Well, yeah, it happens. And like I said, I've never really had a bad experience with anyone, you know, like when I, you know, text them or call them and say, hey, you know, I noticed something on your guitar.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, really? I didn't know that. Right. And they're usually happy that you did notice something or whatever. Or even, it's funny, I had someone come in just a month ago, and he brought an acoustic in. It was in the case, and he brings it in. He said, oh, yeah, I haven't played this in, I don't know, like 2 years. It's been sitting there in the closet. So I pulled it out the other night. I tuned it up, but it just sounded bad, like thumpy. The, you know, the bass string, the E string was just terrible. And I said, okay, well, you know, maybe there's a bad fret, or, you know, the strings are old or rusty, I could see. So I pulled the guitar out of the case, and right away I looked down at the bridge, and the bridge had lifted up. The back of the bridge was up like that. And I look at it and I go, oh. I said, did you notice that the bridge is lifting off the bottom? And he looks at it and goes, oh my God, I didn't notice that. So he didn't notice, right, that the bridge is lifting off. So I glued it back on for him. But it was just like, that's just one of those things, right? Like, you hope that I had noticed that too, right, before he dropped it, or just leaves the case there. It's, oh, you know, just give it a restring and a setup, and then you open it a week later and you're going, oh shit.
And don't you feel like the auto mechanic that calls the people going, you know, because these people don't realize, and I'm not selling you up on this or anything, but it really does need this if you want it to be playable. You know?
No, exactly. And, you know, like you're trying to help people out, right? Like, I don't want to give them back a guitar that I know is not going to play well, right? And hey, everyone's got their likes as far as a setup, and, you know, generally most people will go with what I give them as a setup, which is usually close to whatever the standard specs are for like a Gibson or a Fender or a PRS. Maybe a few little tweaks here and there, but, you know, the odd time you get someone in who says, oh, I need this thing to be like a shredder. It's got to be right down to nothing. And you're looking at the guitar and it's a Strat. Like, well, I can't get that down to nothing.
Yeah.
You won't be able to play it. Everything's going to buzz out. It's going to be nuts, right?
Yeah.
No, it's got to be low. It's got to be low. I don't care. And so you drop it down to like 3/64 or something like that. And it's buzzing and it's just not playing well. He comes and picks it up and goes, oh, it sounds great. Thanks, man. You know, like,
thank goodness.
Don't tell anyone.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it's just like, wow. You know, like, hey, you know what? Go get yourself an Ibanez or, you know, some Jackson
shredder guitar.
Or a shredder guitar for that kind of thing. But you mentioned tremolo, and that's like a bad word to me, right? The Floyd Rose tremolo. I don't understand them in the sense that I understand how they work.
Yeah.
But I don't understand them. Like, why? What is the use of a Floyd Rose tremolo for an everyday guitarist, especially? And I can see as your acts, you know, that you use the odd time for, you know, what do you need a Floyd Rose for? A dive bomb. That's basically all you need it for.
Right.
And you can do that with a Fender trem if you want, correct?
Yeah.
But it's just so complicated. So complicated. So what bothers me more about it is that someone who is working in guitars knows how to set them up, finds them difficult to work with and a pain in the butt. How can you as a player enjoy that guitar?
Yeah.
Because as soon as it goes out of tune or something happens, you just
so
don't.
Fragile.
What happens is you start messing it up more, right?
Right.
You're chasing your tail all the time because you're not doing things in the right order. It's very difficult to do. And if you need a special tool, you know, to intonate it and all this kind of thing. And you just end up with this mess, right? And then it shows up at your door.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh my God, like, fix it. You know what? That's going to take me like 4 hours to fix this. Like, you really want to spend that money, you know?
And I'm always worried that the client's going to leave, mess something up, and think that their setup didn't leave the shop.
Exactly.
So I literally, you know, of course, I love your store or your shop. I like that. It's, and you probably have an amplifier in there to plug it in. Your clients stop by, plug it in, and you play it. And here's how it's leaving the shop.
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to do to it later, obviously, please know that it's leaving pristine and done.
Yeah.
To the best of my ability. Especially those Van Halen detuners. Oh my God.
Yeah, one of the first guitars I had to do on my YouTube channel, one of my early videos was one of those EVH with the detuners there. So I wasn't experienced with it at all, but I took the guitar and I said, yeah, sure, why not? I'm going to try it out and see what it's like. And that's where my distaste for Floyd Roses started. I think liking that style of guitar. But I went on YouTube, tried to find a bunch of videos. There weren't a ton of videos, look online, and eventually found a few things and figured it out. But it's like, oh my God, like even without all the research time and trying to do that, the next time one comes in, and thankfully one hasn't come in, to be honest, it's just like, wow, like the amount of time. So, whatever you would charge somebody, a reasonable amount to do a setup, you're just going, like, I might have to charge you 2 or 3 times as much to do the same thing that I do for a Strat or, a Tele or a Les Paul. Like it's ridiculous, right? So, and if it's something you can't do at home, well, everything, let's be fair. I mean, everything that we do for a setup, most people could do it at home if they just had some time and some tools, a little bit of knowledge, just, like anything. But a Floyd Rose, I'd say no. I'd say that you can't just do that at home. So that guitar, you got to hope stays in tune, doesn't get touched, no one plays with it. Those fine tuner little knobs there on the bridge. Yeah. You don't go too far one way or the other, and then you can't get it back. So it's just a lot of complication.
It is, and I hate to say, but it's kind of job security, really, for us, because they're so complicated that people don't. And that's what's blowing my mind as I've dove into this line of work, is how many people don't feel like, every Floyd Rose that leaves, I have a dry marker board here, and I draw on it for the customer. Okay, one, clip the end of your string off all the way, because if you leave that wind at the end, you're going to mess up that little block that's tenuously holding that string in place. Yeah. And I give him this whole lecture, and I actually it's a dry marker board, but I left the drawings up here because I've had to explain it 3 different times now to 3 different clients. Yeah. Don't crank on that thing, the fine tuner, because you'll break that little lever holding it from popping out. There's so much.
I know. It's so complicated. It's over-engineered, and
it really is.
It's like it's an engineer designed it instead of a guitar player.
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
Like in that sense, and you go, well, you don't really need to do that. And let's come back to Fender again.
Yeah.
Leo Fender's design, 70 plus years ago, still stands the test of time, from a Telecaster, which obviously doesn't have a floating trem or anything, but then the Strat, soon after the Tele. And that is a trem system that works. It's relatively simple, to adjust, to float, if you want it to float or not. And to be honest, most people don't float them. They usually hardtail them down or something like that.
That's
my experience. Yeah, I mean, most people don't float them because there is tuning stability issues when you float them. They'll stay tuned as much as possible, but they are going to move, right? It's a spring, a few springs in there, depending how you play, that kind of thing, seasonal variations.
Right.
But, if you hardtail them down and you still have an opportunity to, flatten out the strings a little bit when you play, that's a great feature, right? I'm very much like a Bigsby in the sense that you really only have one way to go with it, but it's a little more reliable and easier than a Bigsby to sort of figure out, right? But you come back to the keep it simple, stupid idea of like what Leo Fender has done. You've designed a guitar that can be fixed, neck can be changed, body can be changed, all the componentry can be swapped out, and from one guitar to the next, all new parts, and it's relatively easy to set up.
Yeah.
So you can set it up yourself or learn how to maintain your guitar, and unless you have really major issues, you bring it to a tech or someone like that. But so why overcomplicate the guitar?
Right.
Make it simple. Yeah.
What was the quote that I saw the other day? It was a meme someone posted. It said, over-engineering is a sign of laziness. They keep creating this thing so you don't have to do this thing. And then there's another so you don't have to.
Right. Well, how many layers, eh? It just builds up on top of each other until you can't even get back to what the original problem was anymore.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. What's the wildest repair that you've ever seen come through your shop? Like oh my God, could I pull this off?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had screws, like a Les Paul where the neck is broken and someone is just not at the headstock, believe it or not.
The headstock, but it's
broken. Yeah, broken right near the body joint.
Oof.
And someone's just driven big long screws, like 3-inch screws into it, 3-4 screws right into the body, and brings it in and says, "Okay, well, I'm not sure. The tuning stability is not great. I know it's broken, but tuning stability is not great." Really? And so it was one of those you look at and go, can I even fix that? So I said, look, leave it with me and let me see if I can get this apart cleanly and get glue into this neck joint and get the screws out and all that. And I said, you don't mind if it's not pretty, I hope, right?
Nah.
He's like, no, if it's not pretty, it's not pretty, Anyway, so I took the screws out, and fortunately enough, the brake was pretty clean, the fibers and all that sort of went back together nicely.
Okay.
So I was able to get a lot of glue in there and clamped it all down, got it and cleaned it all up. And I gave it back to him. And I offered to, dowel in there, do some other things. And he said, "Oh, no, glue it up. And if it works, it works, And I haven't heard back.
So screwless then. You took the screws out, filled
I took the screws out. Yeah, I actually plugged the holes. I drilled them out, put can't remember if it was 1/4-inch dowels or something. I just filled the screw holes in and then glued it all together, right? But it seemed to work.
Did you have to refinish and everything?
I didn't refinish, and
Okay.
I don't usually do refinishing. I'm not really set up for that. I don't have a spray booth and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I told the client, I said, look, I'm not going to refinish anything. I can give it a light sanding and a bit of a polishing and all that. I'll try not to go through the finish, and that's how I cleaned it up for him. You can still see the glue line and stuff.
Is there a video for that repair?
No, that was a few years ago. That was before YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. I don't know if I would have shown that on YouTube.
Yeah, right. Do you have to get consent for any reason?
No.
Like, hey, don't show my guitar. Is that too weird to ask? I mean,
no, I've never had an issue. I mean, to be honest, these days, most of my clients locally here in the Ottawa area, they all know that I'm on YouTube, and I saw your videos, and they call me up, and they either get my email from the website and that kind of thing. So most of the people know that it's on YouTube, and they're happy when they see their guitars on. I never mention people's names or anything like that. I usually try and block out the serial number, whether that does anything or not. I guess you could get someone saying, "Hey, that's my guitar," from 10 years ago that got stolen.
That's a good point. Yeah. Manotick Stringworks is your company, and it's the name of your channel.
Yeah.
And I always wondered what Manotick meant, but it's a suburb of Ottawa.
Yeah. So Manotick is a town just south of Ottawa. So Ottawa is the nation's capital here in Canada. It's about 20, 25-minute drive from downtown Ottawa. It's on the Rideau River Canal system. And Manotick is a town that was a village that was founded, I believe, in 1860, 1850. Yeah, a long time ago. It's a grist mill. So a flour mill was set up right on the river right here in Manotick. And it became a center for, local business and trade and things like that. But it's still a very small town. I mean, it's maybe about 10,000 people in the area around. But it's a rural, it's rural, suburban, sort of a mix now, of course, with everything being built up all around and everything like that. But it's a nice little town, and we enjoy it. We moved here in 1999 from Montreal. I grew up in Montreal, Quebec.
Love Montreal.
Yeah.
I actually just visited, we went to the Montreal Jazz Festival.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. What a great time. Huh? Oh
yeah, we saw George Benson at a really beautiful theater. I had to see George Benson. The guy, he does like 3 shows a year, and John Scofield played.
Oh, good.
Amazing stuff. I'm a
Yeah.
jazz geek, so
Oh, good, good.
I went for all the jazz.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Montreal, and I went to
Beautiful
Jazz
city.
Fest every summer, and 100,000 people out in the streets in downtown Montreal. Pat Metheny playing, like
Oh,
just crazy and packed like sardines. Just downtown streets, right? It's just amazing. So yeah, Jazz Fest, it's quite a scene in Montreal. So it's
like
pretty,
2 weeks long. I mean, it's
no,
insanely.
it's great. And everyone goes, like you say. I mean, George Benson only plays a few shows a year, and one of them is in Montreal, right? Like
They gave him the honorary, the coordinator of the event, the longtime coordinator guy came out on stage and they gave him an honorary award for being the ambassador of the Montreal Jazz Festival.
Awesome.
It was really moving, very
Yeah.
touching. And I felt bad because George apparently a couple of years ago fell and hurt his shoulder, apparently his right arm. So he doesn't play that often anymore. He does a lot more singing, and he lets the band, his guitarist, longtime guitarist, filled in nicely for a lot of the Benson.
Right.
But when it came to Breezin' and stuff like that,
Right.
George strapped it on and he did the riff, and it was awesome.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, awesome show. And,
Well, you have to honor these guys, right? And
Oh.
women, of the day who are still around, and they laid the foundation
yeah,
for all the music. I mean, I hate sounding like an old guy or something, right? But I mean, really, is there any other music other than the 60s and 70s that has been so creative and has given us so much?
absolutely true.
All the music today draws from that. I mean, I'm not even talking about just sampling from it, right? People just straight on sampling from the music.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find music today that is so innovative and different as all that music was at the time, because everyone was different and new stuff was coming out I guess, it's all a new genre, I guess, and it's all exciting and all that from the 60s, 50s.
Inevitable, yeah.
But it's a shame that we don't see that same innovation, I think, today, right? It's unfortunate.
And then the heart and the soul is being stripped away. And really, I think that's kind of why I gravitate towards jazz, because it's one of the few genres that still kind of holds true to the musician playing the instrument. Turn on the recorder and we've got a cut, instead of let's hop it into Pro Tools, let's over harmonize and digitize the vocals to hit the range. I think that's probably why I'm still gravitating towards classical and jazz, is for that purest.
What's nice about jazz too is that jazz does not have to be innovative as well, in the sense that you don't have to have something completely new every time, because the book of standards in jazz is so extensive that you can pull out something from 1948 and play it today. Yep. In your version of it, the way you want to interpret it and do it, and it sounds great. Absolutely. Even though it's an old song, or it was written 60, 70, 80 years ago.
Absolutely.
You can still interpret it today, and it still seems new and fresh.
As a bass player, Steve, who do you still try and find time to play? Is it?
Oh yeah. I'm in a band. We gig 2 times a month at least. We keep playing around bars and clubs here in the Ottawa area.
What genre does your band do?
So this band that I'm in now is mostly classic rock, of course, and actually a nod to the Rolling Stones a lot, because during COVID, when Charlie Watts died, a couple of my buddies called me up and said, "Hey, we're going to put together a little Stonesy sort of tribute. Are you interested in playing bass?" And I said, "Yeah, great, of course." So 5 of us got together one night and just started playing.
Awesome.
And that was 3 years ago. So we've been playing ever since. And it's a lot of Stones, like Stones heavy sort of set list, but classic rock, right? Early 70s type of stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Who are your influences on bass now, if you look back?
Well, I mean, totally John Entwistle and the Who. Like I was a Who fanatic. John Paul Jones was Zeppelin, of course. Like there's I was into rock, classic rock, now it's classic rock, but the rock of the day. Right. Pink Floyd, not so much for the bass playing, but just the music itself, right? I love Pink Floyd. The Who, Rolling Stones, a little bit. I appreciate them more now, I think, than I did back when I was younger.
Sure.
But yeah, I liked a lot of their stuff. The Doors I used to love listening to as well.
Absolutely.
So, as a kid, right? It was just such good music. And actually really good bass playing on a lot of those songs, even though they didn't have a bass player, right? They always had a session player.
Well, Larry Carlton. And that's interesting you mentioned that, because I'm a huge Carlton fan. And when I found out back in the day that Larry Carlton, you know, Roadhouse Blues, and he was the session guy in Los Angeles. And of course, I'm a huge Steely Dan fan too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Well, then I saw recently a video of Larry Carlton at NAMM, and he's touting this 335, a company that's made a 335 somewhat kind of guitar with his signature on it.
Yeah.
And he actually jokingly says, you know, I came out of retirement to show up here today. And of course, everyone's got their phones recording him, and he does Smiles and Smiles to Go, his you know, #1 tune that we all know. And I went, oh my God, really? He's going to retire? And it's like the George Benson thing. And I found out that one of 5 shows this year will be in Virginia at the Norfolk Jazz Festival.
Oh yeah, there you go.
So I'm actually going to go just so that I can see Larry Carlton.
Perfect.
Before it's too late, you know.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, you know, that Steely Dan, you mentioned Steely Dan. I had an opportunity, like, I think it was 3 years ago. So Syracuse, New York isn't too far from Ottawa. It's about a 3-hour drive. We're about 3 hours north of Syracuse here. And Steely Dan was going to play at a university amphitheater, an outdoor amphitheater.
Nice.
And my wife and I were all set to get tickets and go. And then sort of last minute, something came up and we couldn't head out there. It's like, you know, we'll get them the next time, right? They come around. They're not Steely Dan anymore. You know?
And Michael Brecker has since passed.
Yeah, so you know, it's like, oh no, you know, like, so it's still Steely Dan. It's just like the Eagles are still the Eagles. Actually, they're touring together, right? The Eagles and Steely Dan right now. Like, you know, so I'm sure it'd be an amazing show, of course.
Well, you know, Steve, it's funny that we're talking about Steely Dan, because literally the next month after Montreal, my wife and I are in Manhattan. She had some business there, and I went and visited her. And we go to this deli in literally a couple blocks from the park. And I see this guy, raggedy looking guy, crossing the street, and he comes into the deli. This is after the lunch rush.
Right.
And so it's pretty empty. And it's Donald Fagen.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, oh my God. And he's sitting 2 tables behind my wife. The restaurant's empty. And I'm like, Leisha, I can't tell if that's Donald Fagen or not, because his back is turned to me. And I asked the manager, I said, hey, excuse me, is that Donald Fagen over there? And he's like, I don't know. The manager walks over to the table. He's like, is everything okay, sir? Okay. He's like rearranging silverware that doesn't.
Yeah.
He comes back and he's like, I think it is. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I got up the nerve and I went, look, and all you can really do is just thank him for all the great music.
Yeah. No,
that was as a stuttering fanboy interrupting his lunch. You know, thankfully he was on his phone scrolling, and he was sitting there getting cold, and his matzo ball soup. But wow, that was, and I had, and of course, my wife is from South America. She doesn't know Steely Dan, didn't grow up. And I gave her the entire history, and I said, look, you know, they didn't go out to ask musicians. Musicians asked to be on Steely Dan.
I wanted to, yeah, for sure.
I mean, Donald Fagen is like one of the greats for sure. It was a great experience, and only in Manhattan.
Well, so many studio musicians go unsung, right? You know, they're unheard of. Nobody knows who they were, or they're credited on an album, but you know, no one knows who they are or what they did really. But Steely Dan, I think, because their whole focus was bringing in studio musicians, the best studio musicians, the right studio musicians for the song, and each song, right, too. It's not even just like an album in a lot of cases. I think it really highlighted the work, right, that session musicians were doing. And you know, you had Muscle Shoals, we had the Wrecking Crew, and you know, that kind of stuff that people knew about. But Steely Dan, I think, really brought it to the fore, where you started to recognize that, there's people in this industry who keep it moving, you know, keep it chugging along. They're playing on these albums, they're helping out, you know, all kinds of bands, singers, you know, like, hey, a vocalist, someone who's just a singer, they need a band, right? And there's your session guys who come in and play and rip out an album like that for them. And pretty amazing. A lot of bands too use session musicians that you didn't think did, like Aerosmith, and apparently in the 70s, the late 70s, early 80s, didn't play on their albums because they're, a lot of them couldn't play because of their intoxication or other
yeah,
issues,
exactly.
right? But they just weren't that good,
Yeah,
and so the record companies would bring in the session players just to do the work. They'd go out on tour, obviously, but they do the work in the studio for them.
Absolutely. And I think guys like Steely Dan, if you were a session guy and you went in and did 5 takes of one song and they ended up choosing this other drummer, I think the session musicians knew that was going to happen with Steely Dan, and they didn't care as long as I got to sit in, do my thing, and hey, there's Steve Gadd on drums over here, and there's Donald Fagen, and I think they had the metal to say, whatever, man, I got to be within this. They called me in, which was an honor.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing, right? That the pinnacle of pop rock music, let's say, right? That you were actually being called by them to play, right? Do you watch Tim Pierce at all on YouTube? Are you Tim Pierce is a session guy from the 70s and 80s.
The guitar player too. Yes.
He's so good. Like, he's just
phenomenal stories.
The stories he's got, the experience he got, his demeanor, he comes across friendly and open, and he's super talented. Like, oh my God, like he's
got the wall of amplifiers behind him.
He's got his little pod almost right in his living room that's set up like that. But he's just so good, and he's so easy to listen to and watch. And like I said, even though I'm not a mainly guitar player, I'm a bass player, I love watching him because he's so good, informative, right? He's got so much history behind him, and these are the guys, right, to celebrate and think about. And I'm glad we're YouTube channels like Rick Beato. If you watch Rick Beato at all,
that's how I found Tim Pierce, was through Rick Beato.
And these guys are really bringing back, or bringing to the fore,
the fire alive.
Exactly. And all this music, right, that is so good from what we grew up with, listening even before us when we were younger. All this music can't just go away, right? It can't just die. It has to come out there. And I think YouTube is a good way for people to find this kind of music, rediscover it, or discover it for the, kid's a kid, right? A 15-year-old kid will never have heard of Steely Dan, as an example, unless their parents, a neighbor, an uncle, or something. But if he stumbles on it on YouTube, that's amazing, right?
Suddenly he's listening to Asia and really digging it. And then you do those deep dives. Then Asia would be Pretzel Logic, and then Royal Scam, and and then there's Larry Carlton. Wow, I love that guitar solo on Ricky Don't Lose That Number, or whatever. And I look up Larry Carlton, and suddenly that's how it all started with us too.
You got a record from a friend. You passed it on to another friend. He gave you another record to listen to, and all of a sudden, then you went out and bought that record because you really liked it, and then you had cassettes and you copied them all.
And as a player, I'd have to say Jeff Beck was the guy that blew my mind open. It was like, oh, wow, it was came on the radio, FM radio, and it was Freeway Jam by Jeff Beck.
Right.
I was into Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath. And what is going on here? And then suddenly it's Jeff Beck played with the Yardbirds. He played, and the family tree is many branched, but there's always these connections. It's really fun. Really fun.
It's fun for sure.
Steve, back to guitar repair, if you don't mind.
Yes.
And you already answered the question that I have on my list here. Your preferences. You'd say Fenders are your favorite guitars just because they're working friendly.
From a tech perspective, they're easy to work on. They're simple, they're straightforward, they make sense. Ultimately repairable. Very rarely can you say, sorry, I can't repair that. You will either change a part or whatever. And modifications, you can mod them relatively easily as well, right? Which is nice. I don't know. There's so many good guitars out there. If you were stuck on a desert island and you only have one guitar, I'd waffle between a Telly and a Strat, and only because of the tremolo. Because I would say, well, maybe the trem would give you an issue, right? If you're alone on an island somewhere and you only had one guitar. So the Telly would probably win, right? Because it's
the simplest,
it's indestructible, right? A Telly is a Telly.
Done.
So that would probably be the one, right? Although the Strat would be post number 2 right behind it, right?
Right.
You know,
Because of the voicings of the Strat. That's what attracts me, the different voicings.
Yeah, and especially in an HSS, right? The setup when you have the humbucker and 2 single coils, that
Really?
opens up the Strat even more, I find, right? So it really gives you just a little extra. And if you even change the switches too, right? You can go to there's 10-way switches now that you can get on the Strats. You do a Gilmore mod, which I've done. Yeah, pull, push, pull, all kinds of stuff. So I'm a big fan of, like, the modifications that I like are ones that are not apparent. They're just hidden in the sense that, you've changed. Like, here, an example, you start at the headstock. You put locking tuners. Not that I'm 100% a fan of locking tuners, but there's a mod there, or a better set of tuners, right? Just a better quality of tuner. Change the nut to an tech or a bone nut or something like that. You move down the fretboard, and then your pickups. Maybe you change your pickups out from what are there. The electronics, put in nicer pots. Or change the switch. The bridge, maybe the bridge, you can find a different bridge.
And all invisible mods.
All invisible. You don't see it. You've just upgraded, and I wouldn't even say upgraded in a lot of cases. Sometimes just changing, right? You just feel that, I think I need something a little different on this guitar to make it sound a little better. These little mods, I think, are more important because people get hung up on modifications, and they just think that, if I do that to my guitar, it change everything, right? And then they do it, and it's like, like it doesn't really sound any different or play any different. I'm the last guy you want to ask about pickups because, someone says, should I put this pickup in my, my guitar? And I'm thinking of changing to a vintage style. And I said, you know what? Don't ask me, because
it's a personal preference.
Everyone hears differently.
Yeah.
And
it's subjective.
Yeah, it's totally subjective. I've picked up Epiphones and they sound amazing.
Phenomenal guitar.
Les Paul, and you're like, this sounds great. Like, what an amazing set of pickups, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And I've had Gibsons, and I, in the shop and stuff, and go, that sounds really crap, like, it's not nice at all. But someone else might love it, and it depends how they play. They got a lot of gain, distortion, whatever they got going on, with their rig. But I just think, pickups are the one thing. Don't ask me. Just buy a quality set. Like I always say, look, buy a quality set of pickups.
There is a difference.
There's going to be a difference in the quality, the workmanship. It should sound more consistent, and more reliable in that sense. But as far as the tone goes, that I can't tell you.
It reminds me, we're talking about Fender Gibson, the basic root guitars, and how relatively easy. There's a parallel between what we do and a car mechanic. They love Fords and Chevys. They're easy to work on. You pop the hood. I know exactly what to expect. And then there are those guys that, hey, I'd really like to get some more horsepower or some more rims. Different rims will improve the. There's such a parallel. It's humorous.
No, absolutely. You can, car lovers and guitar lovers, probably the same thing, right?
And we run into and now that we're talking about pickups, you run into if you're going to do that mod, you need to make sure the pots on the guitar will be able to handle the pickup. And having this conversation with the client, here's what to expect. It's here's the prognosis. If you're going to do, or calling them up later saying, guess what I found? This is going to cost you more or not. Yeah. Yada, yada. There's so many parallels. It's humorous.
Well, I just did a modification, if you will, a change on a Squier Telly that actually one of my bandmates brought into me. And he bought it online, used somewhere, and it's a nice guitar, nice cream colored Telly. It'll be in a video in the next few days or whatever. But he said, what should I do with this? And I said, well, it's a Squier, so it's going to be okay. It's relatively new. I said, but you change the pots, put CTS pots in, put a better, put an orange drop capacitor in there, switchcraft output jack, do some relatively inexpensive things to make it better functionally. You know that's not going to be a problem, right?
Okay.
And then if you don't like the pickups or you want to try new pickups, well, then get new pickups, right? And put new pickups in. Get some Fender pickups.
The next inevitable step.
Yeah, and then if you want to change the tuners or you don't, or But, you know, again, the setup's the most important thing of any guitar, of course, right? The playability of the guitar is more important, I think, than the electronics and the pickups themselves.
True.
How the neck plays, if it's set, like we said right at the beginning, right? When you have the action that's so high and you don't know, you just muscle through it and you think that's what it is to play bass, to play guitar. And then you get a guitar that's set up well and you go, oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing I always tell new, you know, aspiring musicians, young people who are getting guitars. I get a lot of, you know, people who've got, you know, their parents have bought them a new guitar for Christmas or for their birthday, and they come in and do a setup for me. And I'm always looking at it, especially acoustics, big heavy gauge strings on them. You know, they're young people, you know, it could be young girls, young boys, and they just don't have the strength to play these guitars. And then they try for 2 weeks and then it sits in the corner, right? So
yeah.
I always tell people is I'm going to put really light gauge strings, you know, extra light gauge strings on this acoustic, and then work your way up when you get finger strength and that. And, you know, eventually you might get to 12s as an example on an acoustic. Start at 10s or 11s at least, and then see how it goes, right? It's the same with electric. I actually tell people a lot of times too to actually start playing electric first, then go to acoustic, because it's actually easier to play, right?
Well, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's a little easier to pick up. Yeah.
Steve, what's your favorite tool in your toolbox? Do you have there, like for me, StewMac came out with the fret kisser. And
yes, I saw that. Yeah,
it's such an amazing.
You don't have to move the strings, right, or to remove anything. You just, it sort of slides under the string. Is that, if I remember?
Yeah, it looks like a fret rocker, but it's got the diamond, you know, just to hit that one fret, and it's level on the frets on both sides. It's the coolest tool, and it's genius. And I have to say, I'm a geek for StewMac. It's, you know.
Well, it's a candy store. Come on. It's a candy
Absolutely. And when you go shopping there, you're like, oh, I need this and I need that. And you start filling up your cart. But what would be your favorite tool?
Well, I wish I lived in the States for StewMac alone, because the Canadian exchange and then shipping sometimes makes a tool expensive. So usually when I buy something from StewMac, I end up buying a lot because I just want it all to come in one shot, right? You know what? My favorite tool, honestly, is got to be a digital caliper. Just that is the one tool I use the most in the shop. Yeah. And for anything, not just guitar work, just anything. You're always measuring something. What's the diameter of this screw, this bolt? You know, the depth of a pickup route or a neck pocket. The ferrules. What's the size of the ferrules? You know, like I'm picking that thing up. Putting it down constantly.
Constantly. And I love that response. It's such a nerd response, because when I got, and I've always hated math, and when I got into this, I was like, Jesus Christ, there's way more math than I ever would have.
Exactly.
So you have to embrace the measurements, and you. Measurements.
Well, on digital calipers, I mean, that's the one thing I would say to anyone. The first thing to get yourself a set of digital calipers.
Absolutely.
That's
with the string depth thing.
Well, that's StewMac has got that version, which I saw, which was really cool. And again, because of the cost difference and all that, I was like, oh, I'll wait around and see if I get that. But I actually modified my digital calipers to do the same thing. And I put a little notch in the jaws so you can measure like when you put a fret, you can put a fret in the jaws.
Yeah.
Notch, you know, the tang will sit in the notch, and then you can
smart.
Tight, right? So I just did that with a Dremel tool. But you know, I modified my own, and I love modifying my own tools, making my own tools. I mean, that's one of my things, right? And
Guitar Garage Talk is brought to you by YourGuitarMechanic.com. Setups, repairs, restrings, and more. Whatever your guitar or bass needs, we can get it done. Offering pickup and delivery service in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. YourGuitarMechanic.com. Now, back to the program.
Well, Steve, then I have to ask that, and that naturally leads into, when I went to your website, you have one product in your shop, and it's those feeler gauges, or
so there's string and pickup height gauges. They're basically brass rods that are sized in 64ths, you know, so 3, 4, 5, and 6 64ths for the guitar and basses. And then I have a pickup height one, which has a 1/8 and a 3/32 or a 6/64 brass rod. So they're bent, in an L shape. And why I have that is because looking at a ruler, like you're flipping up the guitar, you're measuring the height, you're back and forth. I just found it difficult to do. I have a magnifier, that I bring down and I look at and all this.
Yeah.
And I say, well, why don't I just put, there must be some sort of feeler gauge or something that I can do. And I saw someone online who was using like little hex keys, basically, right? Hex keys of, like a 3/64 or 5/64 hex key. And he was measuring stuff. And I said, oh, well, that makes sense. But I said hex keys are metallic. So if you do it on pickup, of course, it's going to stick on there. So I just made them out of brass. So I made myself a set. I did a few versions of them. And I made myself a set. And for, a couple of years, I'm using them. And I had all kinds of comments, right? Like, hey, where do you get those feeler gauges? How can I get some of those? And I said, oh, I make them myself. I made them myself. So my daughter, actually, Georgia, she last summer says, Dad, you should just make these and sell them. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a lot of work. I said, okay. So if you help me, I will make a set, like a lot of them, let's say like 30 or 40 sets, and see, if they sell. So I said, yeah. So we spent a couple of weeks, and I designed, redesigned, tweaked a little bit. We figured out how we were going to make them in sort of a production sort of setup.
Very cool.
Very cool. And we made about 50 sets. We sold 45 of them in like 2 hours. Like once I put them online. Wow. And yeah, it just flew out. And so, I've been making 10, 12 sets a week, just keep going. And that's probably about how many I sell right now, 10, 12 sets a week. So I like that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like making tools, I've got so many one task tools that I've made, right? And jigs.
One task,
like that. Well, you got to do it, and it's like, okay, let me make it. I might use it again. Who knows?
Sure, absolutely.
This makes it easier or more stable sometimes. It's just easier to replicate, and I enjoy doing that. It's part of my woodworking sort of jig making thing. It satisfies me almost as much making a jig, right, than actually doing the project.
solving the puzzles. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there a tool that it's in the works that you might want to develop next? Or?
I'm sort of thinking of something to align tuning machines easier.
Okay.
And I think that might be something
like on a 6-up kind of a.
Yeah, mostly on a 6-up, right? The 3+3, a little harder to come up with a jig. It can do a jig for that, but more like on a Fender style inline. Very simple. Again, always keeping it simple, right? Not making it difficult at all.
I will on this podcast have a link to that tool on your site.
That's great.
It's ingenious, and I thought it. When I first saw your videos, I didn't know about the tool, and I'm like, what the heck is he? Look at that, how clever. And then I went to your site and went, sure enough, he makes those, of course.
Yeah, well, it's definitely, I won't say like a passion. It's just fun, right? I love that problem solving. And, growing up, I don't want to say, I didn't have a lot of money, couldn't buy anything you want, all that kind of stuff. I always made stuff, I'd always make things that I couldn't afford, as it were. Now that I can afford all this stuff, I still make stuff. Because it's fun.
Because it's so much fun. Yeah,
like you say, like StewMac's such a great place, right? I mean, it's perfect for us guitar techs and anyone, luthiers, anyone who's interested in guitars. Everything's there, and most of the stuff you're looking for has already been thought out, right? And they've got something for it, right? So
yeah.
And I guess the problem there is that if you're a hobbyist, and you're not doing this like you do this, full time, you've got a proper business and all that. That's a tool for your business, right? It helps you do your work efficiently, quickly, properly. But if you're just someone who's a hobbyist who occasionally works on guitars or things, to go out and spend $95, on a specific tool that you might only use once.
Yeah.
That's where I always look at the value in the tool. I say, well, yeah, it's worth that $90, because I'm going to use it a lot. I know I'm going to use it, so I'll buy it, right? But if I'm only going to use it once, or maybe the odd time,
Yeah.
How can I make that? Or how can I make something similar?
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
And then that's where the mind starts going. And then, oh, here we go.
And that's why I'm always on eBay searching for StuMac, because there's those guys that bought the one-time project,
Exactly.
the giant clamps that are several $100s on StuMac, but this guy's selling for 50.
And you covet them, right? And you're like, oh God, I want those clamps,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many tools I've purchased that I actually haven't even used yet.
No, just to have them. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because I probably have 5 or 6 things from StuMac that I purchased because I know I'm going to use them in the future.
Sure.
So I just bought them. They're in the drawers.
Yeah.
And they use them once in a while, but that's fine. It's there when I need it. I say, boom, there we go. I grab it and I use it. And it's done, right? You're not
like I was refretting my Stratocaster, and I got a 7 1/4 radius block, and StuMac had a deal on all the radiuses, and I went, I might run into a 10-inch radius block sometime.
Yeah.
So I just went and bought the whole set, and I've only used one so far. So
use the 16 or the 20 ever? Probably not, right?
Oh, good. No, actually.
I know. You got the 7 1/4, 9 1/2, the 12.
There you go. Exactly. That's right.
Everything else sits there and gets dust for the odd guitar that comes in.
Absolutely.
Especially the ones with compound radiuses. You don't want those.
Compound radius. Okay. So being a U.S. customer, and I feel your pain on ordering from StuMac, a U.S. company. I have to say, my complaint would be Graphtec out of Canada.
Right.
And because I prefer Graphtec over Bone.
Right.
It's so much easier to work with. I'm a vegan, so it's a great product for vegans.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I thought of that. Yeah.
it takes literally, and I recommend it to all my customers. But I tell them it's going to be a couple weeks because it takes a long time for this company to get that product down here.
Right.
So I feel the pain of the wait.
Yeah, and we have some companies. There's one Solo Music, in Toronto, which is about a 4-hour drive from my house. They're full of luthier and tech parts and everything. They're great. But again,
.com.
Yeah, Solo Music Gear, I think, if I'm not mistaken here. I can just look it up quickly as we talk. Yeah, solomusicgear.com.
Okay.
And they're a great company. They ship to the US, they ship all over. And, to be honest, you might actually find better pricing if you go to them.
Good to know.
Because of the Canadian exchange, etc. So you check them out. Solo Music's not sponsored. It's just a good company. I also have one here in Ottawa, Next Gen Guitars.
Next Gen. Oh, I do know Next Gen. I didn't know that was out of Ottawa.
Yeah, it's literally 20 minutes from my house. So I usually go to them first online because they're an online sort of pickup place. You can order online and then you can go pick it up, or they can ship it to you. Okay. But I'll go to them first for parts. And if they don't have what I'm looking for, I'll go to Solo, and then I'll go to Amazon or something after that. Right? I try and, Amazon's a great place for parts and that. If you can find some brand name stuff, of course.
Yeah.
Or off-brand, Music Lily. That's not a bad spot for some
good
things.
Point. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not a snob in that sense that you have to have the whatever Grover tuners or the latest hip shot sort of thing out there. Wilkinson makes great products. They're well designed. Like, I never shy away from Wilkinson product at all, and I always recommend it to people. Certainly if they're looking to do an upgrade on a Squire or something like that, or Epiphone. No reason to go out and spend $100, on a set of Grovers when the Wilkinson tuners for $50 or $40.
Do you have a recommendation for? I'm diving into creating my own telly.
Okay.
And I found a guy in Florida that was selling really beautiful bodies that he routes for you. I threw him a curve because I want a double humbucker layout. Yeah. And he had this piece of black Limba that he got from a local supplier, and it's gorgeous. The grain on it is wow. Right. But I've got all the parts. I'm going to do all black hardware. But I'm obviously looking at necks. Warmoth, come to find out, has a create your own neck website, which is just phenomenal.
Oh yeah, you can do anything on it. Yeah, I know.
You're looking at a $400 piece of wood.
Yeah.
But you spec that out to what you want.
Every profile you want,
Absolutely.
scale
Where
length.
the truss rod
Yeah.
starts, and because I'm a
yeah.
headstock truss rod guy. But would you have any recommendations for a telly style neck with a rosewood fingerboard?
Yeah, I mean, other than looking at an actual Fender neck, right? Like buying a Fender licensed neck, or because most of the ones you can buy are made in Mexico. The Fender replacement necks, which are very good, but you know that's the route you would go there. But Warmoth really, I mean, they sort of corner the
That
market.
would be your
really.
go-to place.
Yeah, I would definitely go to them because of the.
It's what they do.
Well, it's what they do. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the infinite variations, right? That you can customize what you want exactly, right? So, and they have that cool truss rod on the side of the heel block. Have you seen that? That's one of the options you can have as well. So
how does that work?
Well, it's like, I guess it's like a screw, right? That goes in like an auger screw almost.
Okay.
And it so you can you access it right from the side of the heel block. So where your cutaway would be, you know, on the left hand on a right hand guitar, it's right there. And so that's where the truss rod adjustment is. Yeah, it's kind of neat. So that's one of the options they have there too. Instead of having it at the top of the headstock.
You don't see that on any production guitars.
No, that's their thing. Like they do that, so it's exclusive to them. So I mean, check it out. I mean, I've never seen one in person, so I'm not sure how it functions. Does it function as well as a regular truss rod? Yeah. Anything's better than a truss rod in the heel.
No, I can't. That's just the worst design. I don't know why.
That's the one thing Leo Fender got wrong.
I didn't want to say it, but yes, having to take off your neck off of your Stratocaster just to get to the truss rod is
and he fixed it right by putting it up in the headstock.
Yeah,
you know, and then so why they still make these bloody guitars with heel adjustments, and you know, and I know it's a whole vintage thing, right? Everyone wants the vintage, but you know, some vintage stuff wasn't good.
That's right.
So you shouldn't reproduce that, right? If you really want a vintage guitar, go buy one, like an old one. If you can afford
there you go.
Don't make a new one like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I made a video. I think one of my early videos was like that. You know, like the stupidest things on guitars. You know, like here's number one. Trust rod adjustment.
Well, I got to check that one out.
No, it's just a short little video, but just like really. Why would you do
totally
that?
Relate. Yeah.
Well, yeah, as a tech, right? You're just like, oh my God, really? I got to take the pick guard off. I have to adjust it, put it all back. You're like, oh, forget it. You
know? That's a puzzle I don't feel like solving.
No, and nobody wants you to route a hole for it either, right? An access hole. Every time I said, oh, let me route this access hole for you if you want, you know?
Yeah.
Oh no, I don't want to change that. And well, this isn't a $4,000 guitar. It's a $600 Squire Affinity you picked up or something. You know, like what's the problem? I want to leave it like that. Okay. I'm the one who has to adjust the truss rod, not you. So that's why I want that hole there.
And one of the features that I really do like on some guitars on Stratocasters is the tilt adjustment option through the plate. It's such a cool feature because I recently had to shim the neck on my 86 Japanese Stratocaster.
Right.
And shimming, it wasn't a problem. You know, StewMac had some nice thin and it worked. Yeah. Thankfully, the first one worked, so I didn't have to keep pulling off the neck and putting a new one in. Yeah. But I'd love to figure out a way to get a tilt adjustment route. But I just have this feeling I'd have to line it up mathematically. I'm probably going to have to do that drill myself because I can't trust someone. You know, I'd have to get the specs for them. I'd have to line up just right.
Yeah.
But that's a cool feature. I've always liked that feature.
It's interesting because when I started doing a lot of tech stuff and repairs 4 or 5 years ago, that was like a big problem. I was shimming like every second neck that came in, every second guitar, bass and guitar, electric guitars.
Wow.
Like, what's going on with this? But recently, I don't think I've shimmed a neck in 2 years. Like, so I think it, and you mentioned 86, right? That was an 86 guitar?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the quality control coming from especially overseas manufacturers these days, Indonesia actually makes great guitars.
Oh, absolutely. Beautiful.
Much better than China, I find, although China can make good guitars if they want to. Indonesia makes really good guitars. I never usually have a problem with them. Korean guitars and Japanese ones are always good as well. But the quality control coming out of overseas manufacturers now is so good.
Yeah.
That, Squires and Epiphones and other sort of lesser brands are, like, I don't have problems like I used to have. Like you said, I used to get a 10 to 12-year-old Squire in and it's like, this thing's unfixable, or it's just so much has to be done to it. Epiphone's the same. Now you get them in and it's like, wow,
phenomenal.
They're better sometimes than American-made Fenders or Mexican-made Fenders, as an example, or Les Pauls, and you go, wow, like the QC is just so much better. And again, it's CNC machinery, it's all kinds of things like that make it better and more repeatable, and it should be a quality product in that sense. So I just think that the quality of the guitars is so much better now that local guitars, so domestic, American, Canadian, even Godin as an example here in Canada.
Okay.
They just have to be better because the lesser brands are better, a lot better.
I didn't know Godin was a Canadian company.
Yeah, they're out of Quebec.
I love their jazz boxes that they they're beautiful guitars.
Well, they're actually I think they're like one of the top 5 makers in the world, like in volume, because they have many brands that they make, and massive guitar maker. But I think that's where these overseas brands are definitely, and even just like Squire by Fender, made in Indonesia or made in China, even the Epiphones, the same thing. They're just so much better than they used to be.
And they shouldn't be shied away from. You get people that have this preconceived notion that buying the Fender or the Gibson is the way to go. And it's like, look, if you're starting out, literally a Squire or an Epiphone will do the job masterfully if you get the right one.
Absolutely. And, I wouldn't have said that 10 years ago.
That's true.
Literally, even just 10 years ago. But the boom in guitar making and supply and demand over the last 5-6 years, maybe through COVID a lot too, right? That spike there. Their quality is so much better than it used to be, and they're not as cheap as they used to be too, right? I mean, I know like here in Canada with Canadian pricing, like a good Epiphone Les Paul, standard type thing is probably going to reach around the $800 mark now here. They used to be $499 type of thing, right? But you got $499 worth of guitar. I think even though the price is maybe doubled for an Epiphone, you're getting much more quality. You're maybe getting double the quality out of an Epiphone, and the same goes for the Squires, especially when you get into the vintage series and things like that. And then, but Fenders and Gibsons have gone way up, and you really aren't getting more for them.
Well, that's a good point.
In the guitar itself, you're not getting any features or the quality build that you would expect for $2,500 or $4,000.
Right. And I hate to divulge another secret of logging onto eBay to find StewMac products that people don't need anymore.
Right.
Logging onto Reverb.com or Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist and finding Squires and Epiphones that people picked up, don't want to play guitar anymore, and are selling for dirt cheap, thinking it's a dirt cheap guitar. If you find those nuggets out there, you can walk away with really good instruments.
Absolutely. And Marketplace is amazing. I mean, Facebook, it's dead to people except for Marketplace.
That's right.
Marketplace, it's actually, we have a thing called Kijiji up here online. Okay. It's a Canadian used, buy and sell thing. And that for years dominated the online used market, right? But literally in the last 2-3 years, Facebook Marketplace, that's my go-to. Like I go there, searching up guitars, basses, parts, whatever, and I find all kinds of stuff. Absolutely. And I go back on Kijiji, which is still a big platform, and no one's posting on there as much.
And like Craigslist, it's just fading off into the
yeah. So Marketplace is definitely, that's probably their biggest thing now. Facebook. It's not even
keeping them alive. That's true.
Yeah,
our generation.
Exactly, our generation. The kids don't like it. Although they use Marketplace, my kids do. They're on there all the time buying stuff.
Oh, well, there you go. Much to your chagrin. So, how do you? Obviously, I'd love to get repair specialists' opinions on plek and plecking. I've personally had 2 guitars plecked.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because they were from Sweetwater.
Like your own guitars?
I'm sorry?
Your own guitars you had?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And Well, one of them was a very expensive Taylor acoustic, and I wasn't in the repair realm on acoustics.
Right.
It seems such a more fragile instrument to do stuff to. So I opted for a Plec on a $3,000 Taylor.
Right.
So I'm not sure if I would have gotten it if I couldn't have done the stuff myself now.
So what do they charge? Like, is it $200 or for? Yeah. So for $200 for a $3,000 guitar, is very reasonable if you brought it to a tech to do a fret leveling job and crowning and stuff, right? So it's in the realm,
Right. And thankfully, in our defense, the Plec can only do so much. I mean, I think our line of work will always be there. There are so many different anomalies on repairs and setups that, Plec is a wonderful device, but again, it's not like AI is gonna walk away stealing our jobs.
No.
But I don't think when it comes to the industry changing, maybe part of that question would be the resources available to us. I mean, if I would have asked this 20 years ago, how is the industry changing? It would have a much different answer, because guys like we mentioned Irvine earlier, how did luthiers and techs do it back then? It's phenomenal, the resources that we have available to us now. I mean, I told my wife the other day, half the fun is, if this screw is missing on this pickup or whatever it could be, it's just so much fun going out there going, oh, let me see if I can find that. And sure enough, someone has it somewhere. And reverb.com is one of my favorite shopping destinations.
Right.
You'll find battery packs for acoustic guitars, equalizers for acoustic guitars you didn't even think existed. But someone has a beat up guitar they wanted to throw away, and clever them, they pulled out this usable EQ, posted it on.
Parts it all, just like a car, just like we were talking about.
Absolutely. Where do you find those carburetors, and where do you find the overhead cam for 67 Mustang? And
because guitars are still very analog, right? We're
That's
not
true.
the guitar itself, even though you're plugging into very digital equipment these days. The guitar itself is still an analog creature. So
that's true.
You do need parts, you need brakes, you need tires, you need, shocks. That's the same thing with a guitar. So I think that's not going to change for sure, right? There's no digitizing of a guitar, I don't think. And I don't think it would be a good thing if you can even come up with that. And every guitar that tries that, or every manufacturer that tries to introduce some electronic digital component into guitar, it just fails.
Short-lived,
they're gimmicks. They're just gimmicks, because ultimately the guitar is just an extension of you playing it. So that's what people want, right? Is I want to be the person providing the input to this device. Then it goes out into the world, and that's what it is. Or there's no digital fingers, right? It's you.
That's very true.
And so that's what's not going to change. And it feels good to hold a guitar in your hands,
very tactile experience,
super tactile. And I tell people that all the time, that your guitar, you have to play it. The guitar knows when you're playing it a lot, because it plays better. Guitar that sits on the wall or in a case, you pick it up and it always feels strange or foreign to your cold. It doesn't feel like it's reacting to you. But if you're playing a guitar, or like my case, a bass, every day, you pick it up and it just fits, right? It fits with you. It feels good. It feels warm. You just know that it's going to play for you.
That's right.
And you got to do that, right? And so, like I said, you hide your stuff away in a case or whatever. It doesn't like
you're not doing it justice. That's true. And it's sad, because I have a wall of arch tops and two straps up in my office. I think I have 8 guitars hanging on the wall, and I kind of treat them like I can almost hear them going, when was the last time you picked me up and play? I can almost hear them saying, why don't you sit down for 15 minutes, blow the dust off of me, and but if you, Steve, to wrap up our interview, and I really greatly appreciate your time.
It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I'm always going to ask this question at the end of every interview, whether it's repair specialists or, you have a connection to the guitar and bass. There's a connection, and everyone that has a connection with the guitar listens to guitar music. What 3 tunes would you put on your desert island guitar mixtape, and why?
I knew you
And
were
I know
going to
it's
ask
such a
that question.
loaded question for guys that like us that listen to several different genres.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, but there's, you know.
Yeah, and again, me being a bass player, I'm a little biased towards bass tunes, but I do love guitar. And you know what I mean? Anything David Gilmour does, you know,
Agreed.
come on, like I'm somebody who, you know, Santana, somebody who can express themselves with the notes he's playing.
Yeah.
You know, it's melodic, you know, so I like melodic leads or just melodic playing. I like that expressiveness that it's almost speaking to you. And I always find that if you remember a guitar solo and can hum it or sing along to it, that's an amazing guitar solo because that's a lyric. It becomes like a vocal.
Absolutely.
And how many people I know who are not musicians who hum along to amazing guitar solos in the song? And they do. Friends of mine, people I know, you're at a concert somewhere, a show, and they know that solo and they're humming along. They know what they're expecting. You know, Eagles, so many great solos with them as well. People know, like Hotel California, right?
There you go.
Down, you know, everyone knows as soon as it starts, right? It's Hotel California. Right?
Everyone connects with it.
And everyone sing along with the solo. And you go, if you can find guitarists who do that, I find Gilmour is amazing.
Very approachable playing. Approachable.
And Santana's the same. Like, you just so much expression coming out of his fingers.
Yeah.
That you just want to listen to that solo. And it's not, you know, it's not a speed solo. It's not
right. It's not flash. It's not
it's
arpeggiated.
You know, all these guys, Satriani, whatever of the day, all these guys is going along like a million notes a second.
Yeah.
It's very expressive. I think Clapton to a point has that, you know, like
sure.
I think he does in a more limited way.
Sure.
Than I think that Gilmour and Santana
he's less of an explorer than Gilmour and Santana.
Yeah, he's more into the bluesy, and he gets the most out of 3 notes that I've probably ever heard anyone do, right? He's one of those guys. You know, Steely Dan, of course, when you get all these great session musicians like Larry Carlton, you know, Skunk Baxter played with them originally too, right? Like, wow, you know, every time you listen to the guitar solo, you go, that's something you listen for, right? It's not just in the background. It's not just, oh, it's a fill. Here's this where they put the guitar solo in. Like, no, I'm listening for the guitar solo as much as I'm listening to the lyrics,
absolutely,
as much as I'm listening to the whole melody, the whole song.
Absolutely.
So I think those are the things that I would definitely, you know, those are the people that I gravitate towards.
So if you were to choose then, Steve, say, what's the quintessential Santana? I'm a huge Santana fan. I've seen him live decades apart.
Yeah.
The guy played for 3 hours without a break.
Still good today. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. His blues, his stint in Vegas, his home base now. My dad actually had a chance to see him last year and said it was just a phenomenal show.
Wow.
And he's not even a Santana fan, and he was completely blown away.
Well,
but if you were to pick, like if I were to pick a Santana tune that really resonates with me, it'd be Incident at Neshaburg. Probably because Abraxas was the first album I ever heard of his. And that one today, he actually does a live version of it on one of his live albums from the late 70s. And he plays Fool on the Hill while he's riffing in the solo. You hear the Beatles, you hear a Coltrane riff, and you hear and a Miles Davis riff.
Right.
And it's one of those palettes for him. It's a blank canvas that he just lets the band do their thing, the groove, and he just starts exploring. Yeah. So I would say that'd be my quintessential Carlos Santana. Do you have one?
Well, you know, I think of the big hits that he had. Evil Ways, Black Magic Woman, but Oye Como Va, that, you know, just the start of that solo, right? Just the first 3 notes, there's that solo, right? You just know what's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And every time I sing along to it,
absolutely,
every time it comes on, and I'm waiting for it, right? I just want to hear it. And I think for him in that sense, so that's the kind of thing that, and he's got a part like that in almost every one of his songs, right?
That's true.
They're just his hooks. Are just amazing, right?
The
so
just tasteful.
Yeah, it's
They
that
make it
expression.
good
Yeah.
to the ear.
Yeah, and expressing yourself through your fingertips, through the guitar, that's just amazing. And some guitarists have that where
Yeah.
they can talk to you with the guitar. Other guitarists are just really good technicians,
Yeah,
and they sound good, but they don't move you the same way.
exactly.
And I'm a guy who prefers fewer notes, and
That's
sometimes sustaining a note is better. Just the way you sustain a note and come out of the note into the next note or the next line. It's like, wow, that was so tasteful. And that's because it's that suspense, right? You have that suspense of listening for what's coming next instead of just being thrown something at you
Interactive.
on and on.
It's
Yeah.
interactive. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
call and
someone with
response,
ears.
that whole thing, right? As the listener, you're anticipating, okay, what's going to happen, right? And then it happens, and you're surprised, or you're comforted, or
Yeah.
it feels
Your
good, or
endorphins,
whatever, right?
the endorphins start reacting.
So
Yeah.
when you have too many notes, and I know Eddie Van Halen, so many people love Eddie Van Halen, and you can't deny Eddie was amazing.
Yeah.
But that's a different style of playing, right? And he has a lot of expressiveness in his playing, absolutely. But it's in your face, right? It's there.
Yeah. And that's why I think Jimi Hendrix was the guy who got me to pick up my first electric guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, I have to go here. I have to find out. And, my first episode is an interview with my uncle out of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Right.
And he and I are talking about when we were younger and picking up the instrument, they weren't musicians, they were magicians. My God, I don't think I'd ever be able to do that. It's that mystique, that mystery that it just, I don't know. And I have to put Brian May up there too.
Yeah, no, it's great player, just amazing lines. Who always interested me, and if you watch any live versions of Chicago, Terry Kath.
Terry Kath was incredible.
25 or 624.
Phenomenal.
It's a simple song. It's an interesting tune. But when you watch him play that solo live, especially, the recorded version is great. But the live version, he attacks the guitar. He
that
tells it. He fights it. It's just like, oh my God, like, what is going on here? Like, it's so good. The performance, he's all in. Like, he is all in. Actually, Jimi Hendrix mentions him.
That's right.
One of his influences, saying that, I can't believe the way he plays, and like Jimi Hendrix said that, like, that's crazy. But Terry Kath is one of the, and unfortunately he passed away early, I think, but
underrated.
Yeah, totally underrated. So many guys like that, right?
There's an interesting documentary, and I think you can find it on YouTube, where Kath's daughter goes out and tries to find the original Telecaster. I think it's actually a no-caster, believe it or not.
Right.
And she finds it under some guy's bed in Florida.
No way.
Where it ends up. I know, it's just sad. It's a completely unplayable condition, was never taken care of, was already kind of beat up in the first place.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. All those outdoor shows back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s just ruined those guitars. Right? People wouldn't even think of bringing them out now, right? And it's like back then, it's like whatever, right?
It's amazing they're still functioning as instruments sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
So Steve, thank you again for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
We covered a lot today. That was awesome.
We did.
It's a lot of fun chatting with you. Someone who's interested in the same things, grew up in the same sort of time period too, and appreciates what we do. And I appreciate what you do. And I love, watching someone who's really interested in keeping guitars, in good shape, in playing condition, and helping people enjoy the instrument that they have, right? Not to fight it so much. And just realize how expressive these things can be, and how they can let you, be an artist. And, you don't have to be Jimi Hendrix or, Pat Metheny or anyone like that, but you can sit at home and play with these instruments and really enjoy them.
And we're helping them on that journey. And it feels good. Every time a client walks away going, my God, this plays way better than I thought.
Yeah, it is funny. Yeah, you wouldn't think it would be that much, a big deal, but it is a big deal because it makes a big difference in someone's experience, right? So, every time you can help someone out a little bit, right, it just makes life a little better.
And how many of those clients have you had that this is my dad's guitar, my grandfather's guitar, and a lot, right?
Yeah.
you know, and those are the really satisfactory feelings.
Sentimental value, and you're working on them, and you know that they're going to be appreciated and enjoyed again. You know, the next generation's going to have them. I just had a 1969 Gibson J45 come in the shop.
Wow.
Pristine, pretty much single owner, bought it in, I think in 1970.
Wow.
And owned it right up until he passed away about 3 months ago. And another person bought it and brought it to me. And one of the sad things about it is he wanted to do a bunch of modifications on it. Add a pickup, do this, drill. I'm like, you know what? I said, no, like, I won't do that. I mean, if somebody else wants to do it, it's just not a $10,000 or $20,000 guitar or whatever, but it's just a piece of history. It was the finish was amazing, crackled beautifully. Like, it was just like, wow. And then the action was nice. I set it up. It was like low action on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I won't modify this guitar.
Right.
I said, you just bought it.
Principle.
Play it for a while, you know, and if you really want to put a pickup in it or do something, fine. But I just, you know, some of the times you just have to say no, right?
And well, case in point, this Gibson SG behind me,
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I try and offer my customers is pick up a delivery.
Right. Yeah, I saw that on your website. Yeah.
So far, so good, because no one else is doing that, and
Yeah.
a lot of customers are really grateful that someone can come out.
Yeah.
To the outer reaches of the Charlotte greater area.
Right.
This guy, case in point, he lives 30 miles away from me, so it's a bit of a drive, but you charge him. But he wanted to put all gold hardware on it, and he wanted to do these modifications. And when I went to his house and picked it up and played it, I'm like, this SG is an early 2000. It's in great shape. I'll do the dings and scratches, yes, but really, you shouldn't think about leaving it the way it is, because it's a really great guitar.
Yeah.
So you have to sometimes be the hard
truth, and I'm not afraid to say no. You know, like I'll just, you know, I just don't think it's worth it. And I think, you know, and everyone's got their idea of what they want their guitar to be or look like, and that kind of thing. But you just know after, you know, playing around with guitars for so long and setting them up and repairing them and what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Let it be.
What should be done and what shouldn't be done, right? And
that's true.
I'm not afraid to tell people this shouldn't be done, and I'm not the guy who's going to do it.
Yeah. Good call.
Call Patrick.
No. Yeah, he'll come pick up your guitar in Ottawa.
Yeah, he'll come all the way up.
That'll be a charge. I'll charge you for that trip. Manotick Stringworks, Steve Roy. Thank you again, Steve, for your time. I greatly appreciate it, and I look forward to watching your YouTube channel. It's you always had a friendly demeanor about your, you know, you get a lot of these texts that have their own YouTube channel and they kind of have attitude. Like, you won't believe, but yours have always been
angry text. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Frustrated. All right, here's what we're gonna have to do.
Yeah.
Yours has always been very approachable and friendly, and you always had the little chuckle, like that thing that you do, like. And I always thought it was a very approachable, good YouTube channel for a lot of, you know, even if you want to just learn how to set up your own Strat. It's a very informative channel for sure.
Well, I appreciate that, Patrick. Thank you very much.
And I look forward to your development on products coming in the future. I'm going to follow your website. Send me an email, Steve, and let me know, hey, Patrick, released the whatever tool that you've created.
The next inspiration I have there, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. Steve, please stay in touch, and thank you again for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks again, Patrick. Best of luck.
Take good care. Bye-bye.